And we welcome you back in. It is Priority Talk Radio here on Truth 101 WXJC. We're glad you're with us this evening. Greg Davis here with you, of course. 5 until 7 here at 101.1 FM, 850 AM. Online, of course, at WXJC Radio, the website, or the app. You can download the free app and listen to the station and keep up at all times. We're at PriorityTalkRadio.com. You can follow up with everything there or find out more. We're glad to have you along with us this evening. And we're also glad to have my friend Dr. Kevin Blackwell back in studio with us, representing Samford University. And he's also got a new book out. So we got lots of stuff to talk about. Kevin, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, Greg. Always enjoy coming to chat with you. And your audience is always responsive to our interviews. And just so grateful for our friendship and the impact you're having, not only in Montgomery, but throughout the state.
Well, thank you. And, we've been doing this for a while now. I'm trying to think back. I know when you started, when you got MTI going, when you took it. Now, what year was that?
I started in January of 2014 at Samford.
Okay. So we've probably been talking since then.
Yeah.
On the air like this a couple of times a year. Mm-hmm. And, of course, when you have a book out or something special going on at Samford or with the Ministry Training Institute.
I need to send my boss over here to talk to you.
Oh, yeah, and over here. That's right. And with Dr. Taylor as well. So always good. Well, just talk to us about Samford. All over the state, we've got Samford graduates, Samford supporters, and I know a lot of people saw the basketball run this winter, coming into spring. So people got familiar with that, so we can talk about that. But then also just other good things going on at Samford.
Yeah, and the terrible call against Kansas. But I'll let that go. We're all still, I don't know if you noticed that our admissions folks, they didn't miss a beat on that. They put out the marketing campaign, don't make a bad call at Samford.
Yeah, I did see that. I thought that was good. Yeah, that block from behind, it was tough.
I know. We've moved on.
Yeah.
It was good national attention.
That caused a lot of Baptists to probably sin that night.
I would be one of those.
Yeah.
So, I didn't say any bad words, but I may have thought one.
Yeah.
No, but things are really good at Samford right now. Of course, the big news for us right now is our Samford Horizons. And essentially what we're looking at with our Samford Horizons, we call it a blueprint for tomorrow. It was birthed out of the Fidelitas strategy that we put together, spearheaded, of course, by our president, Dr. Taylor. It's making an impact already. And so essentially what this is, it was voted by the trustees in December of 23, looking at some phases of campus planning that's happening right now. Of course, we've got three big projects happening right on campus. So if you come to Samford, you see construction cranes. We like to boast we've got the tallest construction crane in Birmingham right now. Yeah, we really do. That's a fact. So so the first thing is the updates happening with our new Wellness and Recreation Center. So you've got that involving 4 buildings. The first phase was a complete renovation of the downstairs of the Beeson Alumni Center, which really focuses in on our student health and wellness, new doctor's office for them, and some counseling services that's available to them there, which is so important for our student health. And then across the street from that, you've got Cybert Gym. We all, if we're familiar with Samford, we're all familiar with Cybert.
Sure.
And Cybert, it was completely
you had the arena
gutted.
up top, and then down below you had the carpet gym and
That's
all that
right.
down there.
Yeah. And the swimming pool.
Yeah, that's right, the pool.
So it's been completely gutted. And that, along with a brand new building that has been built behind it, between it and the football field, it's really coming into shape right now. And then next to that is Bashinsky, which is historically been mostly where our intramural basketball games happen. So we're redoing that for both men's and women's basketball for an indoor practice facility that's going to be top notch. But I mean, workout, esports arena. I mean, it's going to be top of the line. A 24-hour market for students to enjoy, a coffee shop there as well. So bikes, treadmills, a huge track, 2 gyms. It's a really big deal. So it's going to be a major upgrade for our students for fitness and recreation, those types of things. You know, it's funny when students, for years, when students were brought to campus for a tour, we kind of bypassed Samford. We went to other areas for a reason.
You can see that later.
Right, yeah. And so now, we were going to be able to show them a true state-of-the-art health and wellness and recreation complex. So that's part of it. The other part is new residence housing on campus. We have completely bought into Samford University being a resident university. I mean, we really want to be great at that. We want students to come, live on our campus, get the full Samford experience, knowing that if they're with us, we feel like we can really make an impact with them. So not that we're not going to do online. We're going to continue to offer online opportunities, but we want the resident life to be kind of our bread and butter.
An emphasis on in person.
Yeah, for sure. And so what you've got on campus happening right now, you've got phase 1 of our Samford Horizons Campus Development Plan, which is a phase that includes a new 513-bed residence hall for first-year students, and that's going to be between the UC and Vail and Smith Dorm. Now people think about that and think there's not room there to build a building that large. You'd be surprised what you can squeeze in between buildings. And so that's going to be a major update for us, mainly housing freshmen there. And then 2 small residence halls totaling 140 beds for our upper division Greek fraternity sorority students up on our West Campus. So in total, we're looking, at well over 600 bed additions there to be able to house more students, and probably most importantly to Samford people, a new 600 space addition for north parking facilities.
Important.
So, that's important, yeah.
Parking.
Exactly.
Any college campus is that way.
For sure. And so it's really going to be exciting. We're planning on opening the new Wellness and Recreation Center at Parents Weekend in September. So that's going to be great. And then all the rest of that we hope to have ready by the fall of 2025.
All right. Well, man, outstanding. A lot of activity.
Yep.
And look, there's no one ever got on the campus of Samford and went, no, I don't like it here. I mean,
it's spectacular.
It is.
Really
and so all you're doing is just enhancing something that's already really special.
Kudos to Dr. Taylor. I mean, he has just been a phenomenal leader. We've been blessed with great presidents, of course, in our history. And
Dr. Taylor's great. Of course, he's been here in studio with us.
Yeah.
And, I've met with him, and been with him around the state at different events and in his office as well. So always very available to us, I know.
Yeah.
And certainly share values and common vision for the gospel and discipleship. Yeah. So he's doing a fantastic job.
One of the things I love that's coming out of that Fidelitas strategy, I served on the committee for that, and I was on the subcommittee for our faith formation for the university, and I love the fact that we put in that faith formation as one of our objectives to be gospel-centered. There's not a lot of universities in America that put gospel-centeredness.
No, even so-called Christian universities are distancing themselves from that.
Yeah. And we've bought into it, and that has a lot to do with the heart of our president.
Yeah. What students at Samford now, in-state, out-of-state, what sort of the breakdown, do you know?
Large majority are out of state.
Out of state.
Yeah. So for a while now, we're looking at about 30% of our population being from Alabama. The rest are all over the place.
That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah. So last year we had students from 49 states. So we're still looking for that Rhode Island student to come. I heard recently we may have a Rhode Island.
I don't know if we have any listeners in Rhode Island.
Yeah,
we'll
probably
see what
not.
we can do.
But if you know someone,
101's a big signal, but not that big.
Yeah. So certainly, I mean, when we've got a number of international students, literally we are from all over the globe now with our student population. So we're no longer your little Alabama Baptist institution, right? No. I mean, it's a world-renowned
I wanted people to know
university.
that. Yeah. I wanted to mention that. And of course, you work in the office of the president, and sort of, I don't know the official title, but you relate to churches and ministries around the state, sort of on behalf of the university. Is that right? Is that the right way to say it?
That's right. Assistant to the president for church relations.
There you go. So, and you also oversee the ministry Training Institute, which is, we've talked about it a lot here, but it's the old Samford, what do we call it?
It's the Samford Extension.
There you go, Samford Extension Center around the state, which before that was, had another name before that.
It started as Howard College Extension, and then it became Samford Extension.
Okay.
And then for a while was under Beeson's watch care.
Yeah.
And so in 2014, when I came, Dr. Westmoreland, along with Timothy George at Beeson, moved that back into the undergraduate side of things. And so that's when I became director of it. Day one, I stepped on campus.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to mention that because we have a lot of people that have been around a while, and they remember, especially probably the Samford extension.
Yeah. Well, it's historic. I mean, and I've mentioned this on the show before, but the Howard extension that started in 1947 was the first academic extension work in American Baptist Christian higher education. So we really were trailblazers. You know, most Baptist institutions today have some type of extension network, but we were the first. Yeah. So it's a historic program, and thankfully it's going better.
This is a certificate program you can go through. That gives you a full range of ministry and Bible knowledge, I guess you'd say, classes.
Yeah. Ministry training, theological depth involved in that as well.
And you got how many locations now?
46.
Because in 14, when you took it, there was just a handful.
We had 16.
Yeah, and now 46.
Yes.
And they are all over our listening audience, all the way into Tennessee and Florida and Alaska.
We have one in Kenai, Alaska now. We started in the spring, and they did really well this spring. They averaged 12 to 15 students per term.
Yeah.
So we stretch out literally from Kenai, Alaska, all the way to Tallahassee, Florida. Overwhelming majority of our sites in the state of Alabama. I mean, you can hardly go 50 miles without running into one of our locations. And $50 courses, students can take a number of different
so it's $50
courses. Yes, $50.
And you get a highly qualified teacher.
Yeah, all of our teachers could teach in any accredited institution.
I'm not highly qualified enough to teach, so that tells you something. The people you got teaching have got it in order.
They're smart folks.
They really are. So I don't know. I might could teach one if I wanted to.
Yeah,
you think, maybe
we'll see what we can do.
I'm not looking for something to do. I'm just saying I'm always here. So, but I'm just saying the people you got are I'm always impressed when I see. But just call out some of the locations, say the northern half of Alabama. Say.
Yeah, so I mean we've got them in Huntsville, we've got them up in the Muscle Shoals area, we've got them in Gadsden, we've got them in Coleman, we've got sites, of course, around the Birmingham metro as well, and Tuscaloosa, and we've got some Spanish locations too that we're offering our courses at. I mean,
and they're
St. Clair
$50
County,
classes,
Asheville,
and these are the same courses basically with the same textbooks that you would take if you were going to Bible college or seminary.
For sure, yeah.
It's the same.
I designed all the syllabi, so I can speak.
So a lot of this.
That.
So and tell me, I don't hate to throw a blanket across of it, but I'd say a really prime candidate would be somebody who's maybe not looking to go back to college or get another degree necessarily, but they want to get trained in ministry or learn how to study and teach the Bible. Maybe it's a bivocational pastor, somebody going into ministry, or even a Sunday school teacher, anything like that. And you're not worried about getting a degree, but you want that training and you want that teaching.
Right.
Is that a good prime candidate?
It's good. Really our primary audience is lay leaders in churches that are teaching Sunday school classes and just want some depth related to their teaching. We have a number of bivocational pastors, bivocational ministers. We got some full-time in our program as well, a number of student ministers. So, they come from all walks of life. I mean, we're easily the most diverse academic program, at Samford. I mean, we've got a number of different ethnicities involved in our program. We've got folks that are, high income, low income. We got some folks that have a high school degree. I've got folks taking classes with PhDs,
Right.
So they come from all walks of life on the authority of God's
And you
word.
had graduation, before we go to break, you had graduation on Tuesday night at Samford.
Yes, Tuesday night was incredible. I mean, I was talking to someone today that we had graduation and church broke out last night. We have almost 170 graduates in our program this year, and about 85 of them showed up last night, brought all their families. Our friend, Dr. Craig Carlisle, president of the Alabama Baptist Convention, was our keynote last night. I mean, it was a tremendous celebration. We ended last night with me leading them into God Be the Glory. And it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, well, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. All right, if people want to know more about the Ministry Training Institute, where do they go?
Yeah, just go to samford.edu/go/MTI, or just simply search Samford MTI. You'll find us.
Samford MTI, Samford Ministry Training Institute. And we'll get that up on our show notes as well. All right, I do got to go to break. Kevin's got a new book out, Repairing the Missional Breach. We're going to talk about why the church isn't making disciples and how we can fix it. All right, so you've heard about Samford, the Ministry Training Institute, got to know Kevin a little bit. For those of you not familiar, now we'll dive into some of the message in his latest book. All right, it's Priority Talk Radio. Greg Davis here. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back in, and we continue visiting with Kevin Blackwell with Samford University, and also author of a brand new book, your second book, and this one is Repairing the Missional Breach, Why the Church Isn't Making Disciples and How We Can Fix It. Before we get to this one, though, let's just back up to your first book, because you were on with us, you and Pastor Randy, pretty early on when you first released it, just like this one. And it's done quite well, and a lot of people have gotten a lot of good use out of it. Just highlight it real quick, and then we'll move on to this one.
Yeah, Cultivate Disciple Making, Growing Disciples Who Make Disciples is the title of the book. Matter of fact, when I'm done here, I'm leaving and discipling. I'm discipling a group of men right now, and so working with them through the process. But it's a 4-phase process, 20-week process of disciple making. Churches are using it literally all over the globe.
And this
right
was
now.
a process that really came out of local church work.
Yes, it came out
and then you wrote the book out of it. You didn't write the book and then implement it.
Right.
This is how it worked, and then you wrote the book out of it.
We were asking questions at the Station Church where I serve as teaching pastor. You know, what does it look like to implement a disciple-making process, and what did we believe were the key components for that, and what is the tool that we felt like we needed? And so we kind of examined some different tools, and there's a number of good tools out there, but we just kind of felt like there's some things missing, and so we thought, well, why don't we just write it? And that's exactly what we did.
All right, so head to Amazon and look for Kevin Blackwell. You'll find that, and this book. Is it already there?
It is. It's in every major book distributor, Barnes & Noble, Amazon.
So wherever you buy books.
Stock. Yep, christianbook.org as well.
Now, while the first book was very pragmatic, right out of the local church, here's a process, here's how you implement it, make it fit your context, but here's a process. This one is a little bit more, I don't want to call it academia necessarily, because sometimes people think, I don't want to read a book like that, but this has got a lot of history in it, looks at philosophical context of issues that we're dealing with in the church,
right?
And kind of gives you a broad swath, I think, of where we are in this missional breach, as you call it. There's something missing there. So kind of what led you to write this?
Well, what led me to write it was my PhD dissertation at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Kansas City. I was thinking about, praying about what I wanted to do related to a research dissertation. And, my heart all along was to not produce something that would do the local church no good. So I really wanted to put something together that I felt like would benefit pastors and help us in academia to better train people for ministry and missions. And so it was kind of birthed out of that. And of course, my heart's disciple making. That's my passion. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to be a Great Commission person. And so I began to think about, so why are we in the mess we're in right now with church decline and all that? What's happening?
Well, and I'm glad you say it, because some people get mad at me here on the air because I say, look, we got a problem. I mean, we're further behind than we've ever been. Now, I'm not saying we're out of hope or we're helpless. By no means. We've got the gospel. But as far as the way we're going about doing this, the church, based on the way we carry out the church and the gospel and the kingdom movement, we can shrink, and we're doing that, quite honestly. I mean, America is not Alabama. Your county, your town is not more Christian, not more discipled now than it was 20 years ago. Right?
Yeah, we're losing ground.
Anybody want to call in and say, hey, no, my town, my county is closer to Jesus than it was 20 years ago.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah. Well, and look, I mean, this isn't just something that church nerds research. This is something sociologists research. And so, I mean, you look at Generation Z, that group that was born between 95 and 2010, they're the most unchurched generation in American history. And so now you've got this new
and
generation.
we both got kids right in the middle of that.
We do.
Yeah.
We got this new generation now that is being called Generation Alpha. And if everything continues to hold true to that, they will be, the next most unchurched generation. And a lot of this goes back to the millennial generation, where you've got a large number of millennials who now are raising children, and they're not raising children in church.
No.
And of course, faith must be passed down to the next generation. And really what that is disciple making. I mean, you can call it what you want, but it's about making disciples.
What it is, yeah.
And so if one generation drops the ball in that, if one generation is disobedient to the Great Commission of Jesus in Matthew 28, then there is a compound effect for the future. And so essentially what you've got churches that are still functioning in a way that looks like modernity in a post-modernity culture. And really that's the issue. So when we think about this missional breach that's taking place, it's not just a Baptist thing. It's an evangelical thing in many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impacting a lot of folks.
So when you say modernity, make that more, flesh that out just a moment. And you say we got churches that are operating post-modernity.
Right. I mean,
we're pre-modernity.
We're thinking of those generations really that were before the millennial generation. I mean, really what you're looking at is generations before Generation X, right? Of people that were raised by baby boomers and those types of things, where all churches kind of look the same, frankly. And you could also make the assumption that the majority of people in your culture, they may not be church people, but they generally had a belief in the Bible, in God, and they kind of knew some things about Jesus. I mean, there were some assumptions you could make culturally in modernity. Post-modernity, you cannot make those assumptions.
Now, we had a discussion last week, Kevin. Since you've written this book and researched all this, I want to get your opinion on it. It was based on an article that was written, and I just sort of picked up on it. And the author, he said, basically, it's not that people in this now are rejecting Jesus. They just don't care. It's not even on their radar. And they don't, and it's not, and they don't want it on their radar. They're not rejecting Jesus. They just don't care.
Well, and part of that comes back to the millennial generation and postmodern thinking, which is the most. And I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, please, but they are essentially a very me first generation, right? Where it's really about it's a very self-centered thing. How can I make my world better? How can I chase the American dream per se? And so a lot of it is very kind of myopic in a sense in that way. So yeah, they're really not thinking broader beyond their world, essentially. They're chasing the American dream, trying to get the house they want, trying to get the cars they want.
And they're not even thinking about God.
They're not.
Or Jesus. It's not even on their radar.
They're just living in this little bubble, essentially.
And there is a challenge for the church.
Yep. The here and now. It's about the here and now. They're not thinking about eternity. They're really not thinking about next year, frankly.
Yeah.
It's a very now-centric thought. And so, I think that's very true.
Well, you overview sort of the three movements and the history of disciple making from. Just don't go into too much detail because people can read the book, but just give a little overview of the three movements.
Yeah, so in the book, I talk about my own journey to really understand what is disciple making. Now, that may seem like a silly question, but the reality is, Greg, that the majority of my education, I didn't hear a lot about disciple making. As a matter of fact, I hardly remember a teacher in my Master of Divinity work and my bachelor's work, in both of which, of course, was religious education. I hardly remember anyone even mention the term disciple making.
No,
we
not
talked about
disciple making. Discipleship.
We talked about evangelism,
disciplines.
But we didn't really discuss disciple making, though that very phrase is
in the
of
Bible.
Course, in the Great Commission.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've had to really kind of think about what is the Great Commission. I'm so indebted to my friend Robert Mullins, who is now in Huntsville in the Madison Baptist Association,
He's
leading
been here,
them.
sure.
great guy, helped me to really understand better what it meant to be a disciple-making pastor. And so my journey is about 10 years old related to that, really understanding that. So I write about that in chapter 1 of my book. Chapter 2, I take us all the way back to Jesus' ministry. How did Jesus make disciples? I mean, he commissions, of course, in Matthew 28, his disciples to go make disciples. That's the imperative verb in the Great Commission in chapter 28, verse 19 to 20. But how did he do it? So is there a model? Is there methods that we can pick up on that doesn't go into more eisegesis? It's truly exegesis. In other words, it's the scriptures bear it out, right? And we see a model. So I talk about that in chapter 2, that look, we don't have to continue as American evangelicals to search for the next greatest discovery for the church, because the reality is it's always been there. So my frustration, frankly, is that the American evangelical church for the past 60 years, and Reggie McNeil's done a lot of research on that, has been going from one movement to the next, one ecclesial movement to the next. And my argument is, why do we keep seeking the next movement when the reality is the movement's already started? We just got to kind of go back to the basics. And so what I'm asking is, why are we trying to discover, and why are we not trying to rediscover? So I think that's really the essential component of this. And so when you look at the last 50 years of American evangelicalism, you see really 3 major movements that have taken place. The first was the church growth movement. What we see there is we see Donald McGavran kind of being the main driver of that. See Peter Wagner eventually became the leader of that. Very pragmatic. In other words, how can we get the most people in church? How can we increase church attendance? You know, a lot of focus on the local church. So you had a lot of people kind of remaking programs within their church to attract crowds. That's where we see the mega church movement birthed out of that. The attractional models birthed out of that. And so it was kind of get people in church however you needed to do it, you know. And then you see us moving into the emergent church movement. Brian McLaren's group there with that. Rob Bell was a part of that movement as well. And I think they had the right heart, Greg. I mean, they were thinking, how do we reach postmoderns? They were the first people, and it really was birthed out of youth ministry. There's a bunch of youth ministers talking about how can we reach the next generation. So it had a great start, but eventually those guys didn't have the right orthodoxy. They didn't have the right doctrine. So it's a good question to ask, how can we reach postmoderns? But if you try to reach postmoderns as postmoderns, that's not a good combination, because postmodernism is not a good philosophy, right? to give into. And the third, of course, is the missional church movement, which was began out of Darrell Guter's book called Missional Church. It was published in '98. Leslie Newbigin, Karl Barth, a lot of their writings go into that. And essentially, the thinking there is, how can we make missional missional priority within the local church? You know, how can we make mission a priority? And I'm grateful for that movement. The thing is, it's interesting when you research that movement was generally a mainline Protestant movement. It wasn't until guys like Ed Stetzer got involved in it that began really kind of pushing it into evangelical circles, particularly Southern Baptist circles. So the missional church movement was a thing for probably 10 years before Southern Baptist and some of the more mainline evangelical denominations, you know, caught up with it. So what happened with that was mission became everything. Well, if mission's everything, then mission's nothing. Essentially, I mean, that's what's happening here. It became such a buzzword that it lost all of its meaning, and it just kind of fell by the wayside.
Because everything was mission.
Everything was mission. So
you're right. Nothing was
right. So essentially, nothing was.
Sort of lost it.
Matter of fact, that's chapter 5's title.
Well, very, very compelling. I got to take a break. Let's come back on this side and continue talking about his new book, Repairing the Missional Breach. For those of you watching on our video, we'll put it up here and just let you see it. Why the church isn't making disciples, how we can fix it. There it is. It's available everywhere books are sold. So let's take a break. We'll come back more with Kevin Blackwell. And we're back in. Greg Davis here with you. This evening, it's Priority Talk Radio, Good News Christian Values on Truth 101 WXJC. And we're continuing our visit with my friend Dr. Kevin Blackwell at Samford University. works there in the president's office, handles church relations, and he's also teaches there and has written a great new book called Repairing the Missional Breach, Why the Church Isn't Making Disciples and How We Can Fix It. And, I said this as kind of a little bit of an academic type book and came out of your your PhD work. But I think people are hearing this as very practical as well.
Oh, yeah.
And there's one chapter in here in particular, I think chapter 6 is really a chapter that I think a lot of our pastors and church leaders and people that, people that lead denominational groups that really can think, think on a broader context, I think will find very applicable. So tell us about chapter 6. I think that's the one maybe where we can sort of zone in here and give some practical help. And then we want people to get the book wherever they're sold, Repairing the Missional Breach, Kevin Blackwell.
So I give you some church history there. I don't think it's just dry history. I think I think it's an interesting history to kind of see where we've been and how we've gotten here. But essentially, those three evangelical movements just didn't produce lasting results. In other words, we got people to church, but yet we didn't truly make disciples. We kind of got them busy with religious activity, but that's not necessarily disciple making. And so in chapter 6, I entitle that chapter Toward a Faithful Missional Future for the Church. And so, in this chapter, I make some, basically, I make some conclusions related to where we're at now, where we find ourselves in this cultural moment, and how do we better connect with the culture that we've got. Now, look, we can all sit around and complain, right? That, well, this culture right here, and we could just complain about the things that's wrong with it. But the reality is that ain't going to do any good. So, ultimately, we're placed to reach them. Yeah. And, when Leslie Newby and McGavran both came off of the mission field, they came back to, with McGavran came back to America, with Newby came back to England, and both found themselves in the midst of an unreached country. They left to go do missions, stayed on the mission field for a long time, came back and said, what in the world happened while we were gone? So they both kind of saw the same thing. This is a new world. This is an unchurched world we're now entering. Absolutely. So we got to really rethink where we're at in this missional moment and really see ourselves, frankly, as missionaries in a foreign country. Yep. And that's where we're at right now.
It's come to that, yeah.
Yeah. So what I would challenge the local pastors to think about, how are you defining success in your church? When 2024 is over and you sit down and you kind of reflect on that year, how will you define success? Mm-hmm. And how we define success, frankly, is one of the most critical issues. I think Jesus has already defined success for us in the Great Commission. So you think about the Great Commission. The mistake, I think, and the real missional breach is that we tend to take that and we either bifurcate it. In other words, we say, well, it's a discipleship and evangelism. Or sometimes we trifurcate it. We say, well, we got to go, we got to baptize, and we got to teach. Mm-hmm. Either way, we divide it all up. Yep. And the reality is we miss the main point of this. Mm-hmm. Jesus said, go and make disciples. Mm-hmm. It's almost like we can't see the forest for the trees here. We're constantly thinking about these things. But the main thing is we got to make disciples. Yep. So what does that look like? Well, ultimately, you've made a disciple when a disciple is making disciples.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the question is, how many multiplying disciple makers do you have in your church right now? How many people have you personally discipled that are out making disciples? I find that a lot of pastors complicate this. They think it's too. They just think it's so complicated, and it's not that complicated. Mm. The reality is, we've got to work within our church systems and processes that. Here's the thing: you're ultimately going to produce what you are preparing to produce.
Yeah. Yep.
The processes.
You're going to produce something,
right? The processes and systems that you have in place right now is going to produce exactly what you expect it to. Okay. The question is, have you put in the right processes here? So, when we think about the Great Commission as being discipleship and then evangelism, or evangelism and then discipleship, right? What we do is we create a breach. And I'm encouraging pastors to think differently about that. Here's why. For years, we've approached that with, well, it's evangelism, and then it's discipleship. Mm-hmm. The problem with that thinking is, with postmodern culture, we're having to disciple people to evangelize them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're starting in the negative.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, you're right.
I mean, you can't just go cold call on a door, right? Anymore.
Doesn't work like it
doesn't
used to.
work like
in
that.
most settings. It doesn't. No.
Right, and so particularly with this culture now, it's going to take a lot more time. It's going to take maybe multiple conversations to get someone to a moment of decision where they follow Christ. So if we say, well, it's evangelism then discipleship, well, that sounds good, but the reality is we're missing the ultimate point, to make disciples. And if you're going to make disciples, it may just take discipleship before the conversion takes place.
Yes.
And so we got to kind of rethink that a little bit. Also, another thing we've got to rethink is not just attracting people to church, not just drawing crowds, right? Most pastors say, well, I'd sure love to draw a crowd this Sunday. Well, I hope you draw a crowd this Sunday. But that can't be your ultimate goal, because you're going to set yourself up for disappointment and, frankly, burnout.
Well, and whatever you do to get them, you got to do to keep them. And
Exactly.
You can't keep one up in yourself.
Which was the issue with the church growth movement.
Yeah, that's right.
Ultimately, that was what
you run out
wrong.
of tricks eventually.
Exactly.
And
so,
the world's always got better tricks than we do.
100%.
But yeah, I love what you're saying, that the people are not where they were 20, 30, 40 years ago, probably even 10 years ago. They're not sitting around waiting on somebody to come knock on their door or stop them on the street so they can, fall on their knees and repent of their sins.
Right.
Yes, does that happen? Yes, of course it happens. And we're in Alabama, so, we're probably a little closer to that model than some other parts of the country are.
Well, without a doubt, yeah.
Yeah. So, but if you're thinking ahead and you're planning for something, like you said, you better think about it a little differently.
Yeah.
You've challenged my thinking.
For sure. We've got to do that. And let me just say this, too. I know we're short on time.
3 or 4 minutes. Yeah.
Here's the thing I want to say to pastors. Instead of working so hard to attract a crowd, why don't you do what Jesus did? Jesus, when you look at Jesus did not spend a lot of time with crowds.
No, he thinned out the crowd. I was going to say that.
John 6.
Yeah.
Jesus spent the majority of his time investing in a few guys.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind that we as church leaders today don't look at that and think, if Jesus decided to invest the majority of his life, or the majority of his ministry, I should say, investing in a few men who would later go out and multiply themselves, disciples who would go on to make disciples, just read the book of Acts, why do we think we can't do that? So, pastors think, well, gosh, how do I implement a discipling strategy? I don't know if they think, oh, I got to read, 8 books to do it. It's so simple.
Yeah, and let's just say this for the pastors, yes, of course. But those of you who are at a church, and you've had pastor after pastor come through over the years, maybe change your expectations, because a lot of times a pastor is coming to fit into the model that you've got.
Yeah.
And if you ask a typical layperson or a deacon at a church or somebody like that, hey, how's your oh man, our pastor's doing good, man, we've been growing, got all kind of new people coming,
that's the expectation,
young people coming,
right?
That's what you hear. And so the pastor does that.
Sure.
Not, well, man, no, he's got 2 or 3 people and he's really discipling them.
Yeah.
Nobody ever measures that as success.
But if that guy will take a few people,
in time, that will work.
Absolutely.
But they got to be given the time.
It is not
like
a
college football
approach.
coach. You got to give them a couple of years.
Absolutely. And over time, and that's really the argument of chapter 6, over time, if you will just do it, remember, during Jesus' ministry, we see in Acts 1, 120 believers. So by worldly standards, Jesus would have been an utter failure.
Yeah, small church.
A small church, right?
Yeah, you're right.
But look what those people did. He invested his life in them, and they went on to invest their life in others.
Well, I think it's outstanding. And the book is available everywhere books are sold. Repairing the Missional Breach. There it is. For those of you, if you want to see this conversation, it's on our Facebook page. Why the church isn't making disciples and how we can fix it. And I guess I'd just say, if your church is just knocking it out of the park, making disciples and make disciples, and man, I mean, you're just running over with that, this book's probably not for you. But if you think, you look and go, hey, our church is struggling a little bit with this, then hey, why not? Give it a shot. Because you may discover some things in here that you haven't thought about, and you may reframe your thinking on this whole issue.
There's several years of research involved in that book.
I know you worked hard on it.
But practical time as well.
You got the PhD. And flying all good?
We're done.
We've
been
done
over a year.
I know you've been done, but that process is pretty taxing, isn't it?
Oh, my. Yeah.
Do you get a grade on that at the end? Or is it just you got it?
Yeah, you get grades, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know on that when you got down to the final project,
yeah.
the book, if
Yeah.
you actually got a grade or
Well,
if it was
the
just
dissertation. Here's the thing. You know, of course, you get for your.
I'm very far from a PhD, so I'm just asking questions.
You sit for your
for smart
dissertation
guys
committee,
like you.
and you have to pass the dissertation,
Yeah.
right? You've got to defend your dissertation, and I did. So praise God for
There
that.
you go. All right. Repairing the Missional Breach with Kevin Blackwell, and also his previous book on discipleship as well. You can find them both at Amazon or wherever books are sold. And it's always a pleasure to have you with us.
I'm
and everybody,
grateful for you,
keep up
Greg.
with Samford University. They're doing a fantastic job there. And we always enjoy the update and the Ministry Training Institute as well that we talked about earlier. All right, everybody. Thank you for being with us. God bless you.